Reuben Calloway adjusted his tie as he waited at Toulouse's, one of the finest Creole restaurants in New Orleans. The reservation had been made weeks in advance, a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of his marriage. At 38, he still maintained the disciplined physique from his military days, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his posture impeccable. Some habits never died, even when everything else was crumbling around you. The maitre d' approached with a bottle of champagne. "Your usual, Mr. Calloway?" "Yes, thank you." Reuben checked his watch again. Lenora was 15 minutes late, which wasn't unusual these days. He had grown accustomed to waiting for her in more ways than one. When she finally arrived, her entrance turned heads. Lenora Calloway had that effect on people. Her caramel skin glowed under the dim lighting, her curves accentuated by a tight red dress that Reuben didn't recognize. New, he thought. Another purchase she hadn't mentioned. "Sorry I'm late," she said without meeting his gaze. No kiss, not even on the cheek. Just a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "It's fine." Reuben stood to pull out her chair. "You look beautiful." Lenora settled into her seat with practiced grace. "This place hasn't changed." Her tone suggested boredom rather than nostalgia. "It's where we had our first date." Reuben tried to catch her eye, to establish some connection. 10 years ago. Has it been that long? Lenora took a sip of the champagne, her crimson nails tapping against the glass. The rhythm was nervous, impatient. Reuben studied her face. Once, he had known every expression, every micro-movement. Now she felt like a stranger wearing his wife's face. "I thought tonight we could talk," he said. "Really talk." Lenora's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, a small smile forming on her lips before she quickly tucked it away. "About what?" "About us. About what's happening to our marriage." "Nothing's happening to our marriage, Reuben." Her voice was measured, careful. "We're just growing apart. It happens. It doesn't just happen, Lenora. People choose to grow apart." Lenora took another sip of champagne. "Maybe we should order first." The waiter arrived, saving her from further conversation. Reuben ordered the blackened redfish, while Lenora chose the crab cakes. As the waiter departed, a heavy silence fell between them. "Remember when we used to talk for hours?" Reuben asked, his voice quiet. "About everything and nothing. We were younger then," Lenora replied. "We had less to worry about. And now we have real lives, real pressures." She shrugged. "It's not the same." "It could be," Reuben insisted. "If we tried." Lenora's phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't even try to hide her reaction, a genuine smile. The kind Reuben hadn't seen directed at him in months. "Important?" he asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "Work," Lenora lied smoothly. "You know how it is." Before Reuben could respond, a commotion at the front of the restaurant drew their attention. A tall man with broad shoulders and an expensive suit was arguing with a maitre d'. "I don't care about your reservation policy," the man said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "I'm joining the Calloways. Table for 3. Reuben's spine stiffened. He recognized the voice before he saw the face. Weston Merrick, a real estate developer known for his ruthless business tactics and inflated ego. They had met at various social functions over the years, but had never been more than acquaintances. The maitre d' looked helplessly in their direction. Reuben turned to Lenora, expecting shared confusion or annoyance. Instead, he found resignation on her face. Weston strode toward their table, confidence oozing from every pore. "There you are," he said, as if they had been expecting him. "Why didn't you invite me?" The restaurant fell silent, dozens of eyes watching the scene unfold. Reuben waited for Lenora to say something, to express shock or confusion, to ask what the hell this man was doing interrupting their dinner. Instead, she sighed and pulled out the empty chair beside her. "Reuben, let's not make a scene." 3 words, and everything became crystal clear. The late nights at work, the new clothes, the emotional distance, the constant checking of her phone. A cold, numbing sensation spread through Reuben's body, starting from his chest and radiating outward. He had suspected, of course, had even confronted her once or twice. But Lenora had always denied it, had always made him feel paranoid and controlling for even asking. Yet here was the proof, sitting down at their anniversary dinner without a hint of shame or apology. "You two know each other," Reuben said. "Not a question." "Reuben," Lenora started, her tone cautious. "Don't." Reuben held up a hand. "Just don't." Weston flagged down a waiter. "Scotch, neat," he ordered, before turning to Reuben with a smirk. "Lenora, didn't tell you I was joining?" "Apparently not." Reuben's voice was deadly calm. Years of military training had taught him control under pressure. This was just another battlefield, another kind of ambush. "Weston, I told you this wasn't a good idea," Lenora hissed. "Why not?" Weston asked, his arrogance unbearable. "We're all adults here. Besides, I was tired of being the secret. So it wasn't just an affair. It was an ongoing relationship, serious enough that Weston felt entitled to a place at their table. Serious enough that he was tired of hiding. Reuben looked at his wife, the woman he had built his life around, the woman he had trusted without question. "How long?" Lenora at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Reuben, we can talk about this later." "How long?" Each word was ice. 6 months, Weston answered for her, accepting his scotch from the waiter. "Though we've known each other for years." 6 months. Half a year of lies, of looking him in the eye while sleeping with another man. Half a year of Reuben trying to fix a marriage that she had already abandoned. Reuben placed his napkin on the table and stood. His movements were deliberate, controlled. "You two enjoy," he said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet menace that made even Weston's smug expression falter slightly. "Because I'm done with this marriage." "Reuben, don't be dramatic," Lenora said, a hint of panic finally showing through her composure. He dropped $300 bills on the table. "That should cover dinner. And a tip for the poor staff who had to witness this." With that, he walked out, spine straight, face impassive. Only when he reached his car did he allow his hands to shake, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He started the engine, but didn't drive right away. Through the restaurant window, he could see Lenora and Weston, already deep in conversation. No running after him. No attempts to explain or apologize that it was at that moment that something inside Reuben Calloway, something good and trusting died. And something colder, more calculated, took its place. The house was too quiet when Reuben entered. For 10 years, this Georgian-style home in the Garden District had been his sanctuary. Now it felt like a museum of broken promises, every room filled with memories that were suddenly tainted. He moved methodically through the house, gathering essentials. Clothes, toiletries, important documents. He wasn't thinking beyond the immediate need to escape, to put physical distance between himself and the betrayal. Their bedroom, no. Her bedroom now. He paused at the sight of their wedding photo on the dresser. They had looked so happy, so certain of their future together. What a joke. He placed the frame face down and continued packing. An hour later, the front door opened. He heard the click of Lenora's shoes on the hardwood floor, the rustle of her movements as she set down her purse. "Reuben." Her voice echoed through the house. "Are you here?" He didn't answer, continuing to fill his suitcase with methodical precision. Lenora appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, still in her red dress, looking more irritated than contrite. "So you're just going to leave? Just like that? Just like that?" Reuben confirmed, not looking up from his task. "You can't just walk away like this," she said, crossing her arms. "We need to talk about this like adults." "Like adults?" Reuben finally looked at her, his expression hard. "Adults don't ambush their spouses with their lovers at anniversary dinners." "That wasn't my idea," Lenora protested. "Weston can be impulsive sometimes. I never would have planned it that way. But you didn't stop it either." Reuben zipped up his suitcase. "You didn't stand up and leave with me. You didn't tell him to go to hell. You pulled out a chair for him." "Lenora, what was I supposed to do? Create an even bigger scene?" "You were supposed to respect our marriage," Reuben said quietly. "But clearly, that ship sailed 6 months ago." Lenora sighed, dropping her defensive posture. "Look, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Weston and I, we just connected." "Connected," Reuben repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. "While you were married to me. We weren't happy, Reuben." She said it so matter-of-factly, as if it were an established truth rather than her convenient justification. "We haven't been happy for a long time." I was happy, Reuben said. Or at least, I was trying to be. I was fighting for us while you were busy connecting with someone else. Weston makes me happy, she said, a flash of defiance in her eyes. He understands me. Reuben felt his jaw tighten, felt something snap inside him at her lack of remorse. There would be no apology, no true acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. Just excuses and justifications. Then by all means, be happy with Weston, he said, lifting his suitcase. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. Divorce? Lenora's composure cracked slightly. Don't you think you're overreacting? We could try counseling or... Counseling? Reuben laughed, a sound devoid of humor. For what? So you can pretend to work on our marriage while continuing to see him? No thanks. He brushed past her, heading for the door. Where are you going? She called after him, a note of panic finally entering her voice. Away from you, he replied simply. I'll be back for the rest of my things later. Reuben, wait. But he was already out the door, the cool evening air relief after the suffocating atmosphere inside. He loaded his suitcase in his car, got behind the wheel, and drove away without looking back. That it was only when he was several blocks away that he pulled over, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of trust and love and building a life together, all destroyed in a single evening. His phone buzzed with a text from Lenora. We need to talk about this rationally. Come home. The words seemed hollow now. Reuben turned off his phone and pulled back onto the road. He knew where he needed to go. Margot Calloway's apartment was in a converted warehouse in the warehouse district, all exposed brick and industrial chic. Despite the late hour, she answered her door on the first knock, looking completely put together in silk pajamas and a silk robe. One look at Reuben's face told her everything she needed to know. Well, shit, she said, stepping aside to let him in. That bad, huh? Reuben entered without a word, setting his suitcase by the door. Margot's apartment reflected her personality, organized, elegant, and intimidating. As one of New Orleans' most feared attorneys, she had built a reputation for ruthless efficiency and an uncompromising approach to the law. Drink? She asked, already moving toward her well-stocked bar. Whiskey, Reuben replied, sinking onto her leather sofa. Neat. Margot poured 2 glasses and handed one to her brother. Talk. Reuben took a long sip before recounting the evening's events. As he spoke, Margot's expression hardened, her dark eyes so similar to his own growing cold with anger. The audacity, she muttered when he finished. To do that in public, at your anniversary dinner. It's over, Reuben said flatly. The marriage, I mean. Clearly, Margot agreed. What a waste of 10 years. Reuben drained his glass. I want a divorce. I should hope so. And? Margot raised an eyebrow, reading his tone perfectly. Reuben met his sister's gaze, something dark and determined passing between them. And I want them both to suffer. A slow smile spread across Margot's face, the kind that had made opposing attorneys quake in their expensive shoes. Now you're talking. She refilled his glass, then raised her own. To justice. To revenge, Reuben corrected, clinking his glass against hers. Margot took a sip, then set her glass down with purpose. I'll need to know everything. Every weakness, every pressure point, every skeleton in their closets. Lenora relies on me, Reuben said, his mind already working. She always has. Financially, socially, emotionally. She's never had to face consequences because I've always shielded her from them. And Weston, arrogant, self-important, cares more about his image than anything else. Perfect. Margot nodded approvingly. Both highly exploitable weaknesses. I want to be methodical about this, Reuben said. No blind rage, no impulsive moves. I want to dismantle their lives piece by piece. The prenup is solid, Margot reminded him. She gets nothing if she cheats. We just need evidence. Evidence won't be a problem, Reuben assured her. Not after tonight's public display. Margot studied her brother's face. You've never been vindictive, Reuben. It's not in your nature. Maybe it should have been, he replied. Maybe if I hadn't been so trusting, so willing to look the other way, she wouldn't have thought she could get away with this. She underestimated you, Margot agreed. They both did. They see your kindness as weakness. Their mistake. Ruben's voice was hard. I won't make the same error twice. Margot raised her glass again. To new beginnings and painful endings, Ruben added, meeting her toast. As they drank, a plan began to form in Ruben's mind. Lenora and Weston had taken everything from him: his marriage, his trust, his future. Now he would return the favor, dismantling their lives with the same cold precision they had used to destroy his. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it, Margot said, standing. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start planning. Ruben nodded, grateful for his sister's unwavering support. In a world that had suddenly turned upside down, Margot was his one constant, the one person he knew would always have his back. Later, lying in the darkness of Margot's guest room, Ruben stared at the ceiling, sleep eluding him. His phone remained off, sparing him Lenora's messages and calls. He didn't need to hear her excuses or her rationalizations. Her actions had spoken loudly enough that in the military, Ruben had learned an important lesson. When ambushed, don't panic. Assess the situation, identify the threat, and neutralize it systematically. Tonight, he had been ambushed in the most personal way possible. Now it was time to fight back. With that thought, he finally drifted into a dreamless sleep, his resolve hardening even in unconsciousness. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Margot's guest room as Ruben woke. For a moment, disorientation gripped him: unfamiliar ceiling, unfamiliar bed. Then the previous night's events came rushing back, a tide of betrayal and anger that threatened to pull him under. That he checked his phone. 17 missed calls and 12 text messages from Lenora. He deleted them all without reading. In the kitchen, Margot was already dressed for court in a sharp charcoal suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She pushed a cup of coffee toward him as he entered. You look like hell, she observed. Feel like it too, Ruben admitted, taking the coffee gratefully. I've cleared my schedule for lunch, Margot said, checking her watch. Meet me at my office at noon. We'll start putting together a strategy. Ruben nodded. I appreciate it. Don't thank me yet, Margot replied with a grim smile. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. After she left, Ruben showered and dressed, then sat at Margot's dining table with a legal pad. He needed information ammunition for the battle ahead. First, he called his bank and transferred half of their joint accounts into his personal account, which Lenora couldn't access. It wasn't vindictive, it was protective. He knew how Lenora operated when she was angry. Next, he called their family doctor and canceled his upcoming physical. The receptionist asked if he wanted to reschedule. No, Ruben said. I'll be finding a new doctor. One by one, he began cutting ties, creating distance between his life and the one he had shared with Lenora. Each call, each decision, felt like removing a piece of shrapnel from a wound, painful but necessary for healing. At noon, he met Margot at her office in a gleaming high-rise overlooking the Mississippi River. Her corner office reflected her status at the firm: spacious, with an intimidating mahogany desk and walls lined with law books and accolades. Sit, she instructed, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Let's talk strategy. Ruben sat, feeling oddly like a client rather than a brother. Where do we start? With what we know, Margot said, opening a notebook. Lenora has been cheating with Weston Merrick for at least 6 months. The prenup clearly states infidelity as grounds for forfeiture of any financial settlement. What we need is documentation. After last night, we have dozens of witnesses, Ruben pointed out. Better than nothing, but still hearsay. We need something more concrete. Margot tapped her pen against the desk. Text messages, emails, hotel receipts. Anything that proves a physical relationship. Ruben thought about it. I don't need a private investigator for this. I know Lenora better than anyone. True, Margot agreed. But I'd still recommend hiring one. Not because you couldn't find what we need, but because it gives us a professional third party who can testify if necessary. Fine, Ruben conceded. But I'll do my own digging too. What about Weston? Margot asked. What do we know about him? Divorced twice, Ruben recalled. Both times, he walked away relatively unscathed. He's got money, connections, and an ego the size of Texas. But he cares about his image more than anything. He's built this persona of a respectable businessman, a pillar of the community. The reality is he's cutthroat and manipulative. Most of his business associates fear him rather than respect him. So his public image is his weakness, Margot noted with satisfaction. We can work with that. What I don't understand, Reuben said, is why Lenora would risk everything for him. She's not stupid. She knew what she stood to lose. People in affairs aren't rational, Margot replied. They're addicted to the excitement, the forbidden nature of it. Plus, Weston probably made a lot of promises. Men like him always do. Reuben nodded slowly. She's always been reckless, relying on me to shield her from consequences. And Weston, he's the type who thinks he's untouchable. Perfect, Margot said with a predatory smile. Arrogance and recklessness are a volatile combination. They'll self-destruct with just a little push from us. She outlined a three-pronged approach: legal, financial, and social. The legal aspect would be straightforward in forcing the prenup and ensuring Lenora walked away with nothing. The financial strategy involved securing all of Reuben's assets and cutting off Lenora's access to joint funds beyond what was legally required during the divorce proceedings. But it was the social strategy that truly caught Reuben's attention. Margot proposed a campaign to systematically undermine both Lenora and Weston's reputations, to expose their affair in the most humiliating way possible, and to drive a wedge between them that would eventually destroy their relationship. The goal, Margot explained, is not just to win the divorce. It's to make them regret ever crossing you. Reuben considered his sister's words. A part of him, the part that had loved Lenora for 10 years, recoiled at the thought of deliberately causing her pain. But another part, the part that had been betrayed and humiliated, embraced the idea with cold satisfaction. "Let's do it," he said finally. "All of it." Margot nodded approvingly. "I'll file the divorce papers today. Lenora will be served at work, maximum impact. And Weston, we'll get to him," Margot assured him. "But first, we need to gather information. I have a private investigator I trust. He's discreet and thorough." She made a call, speaking in clipped, professional tones. When she hung up, she turned back to Reuben. "He'll start today. In the meantime, I suggest you stay with me. Don't go back to the house unless Lenora isn't there. I need clothes, books, some personal items," Reuben said. "Make a list," Margot instructed. "I'll send my assistant with you to get them. Having a witness present will prevent Lenora from causing a scene or making false accusations." Reuben nodded, impressed by his sister's foresight. "You've thought of everything. That's why I win," Margot said simply. "Now, let's talk about your next move." Over lunch ordered in from a nearby deli, they continued planning. Reuben would need to secure his position at work. Lenora had connections at his engineering firm through various social circles, and she might try to poison the well. "Speak to your boss," Margot advised. "Be straightforward but professional. No need for details, just that you're going through a divorce and wanted to give him a heads up in case there are any uncomfortable situations." By the time they finished lunch, Reuben had a clear path forward. The sense of helplessness that had engulfed him the previous night had been replaced by resolve. He wasn't just going to survive this betrayal, he was going to exact a price for it. "Remember," Margot said as he prepared to leave, "this isn't just about the divorce. It's about making sure they both understand that actions have consequences." "Trust me," Reuben replied, his voice steady. "That's one lesson they won't forget." Later that afternoon, armed with a list and accompanied by Margot's efficient assistant, Jacob, Reuben returned to the house he had shared with Lenora. He used his key, half expecting to find the locks changed, but the door opened smoothly. The house was quiet, Lenora presumably at work. Moving efficiently, Reuben gathered clothes, books, his laptop, and various personal items. He deliberately left behind the gifts Lenora had given him over the years: watches, cufflinks, the expensive pen she'd bought for his last birthday. He wanted nothing that would remind him of her. In the study, he found himself pausing at the filing cabinet. Methodically, he began removing important documents: tax returns, investment statements, insurance policies. Jacob watched silently, occasionally offering to carry something out to the sea. Miss Reuben closed the filing cabinet. His eyes fell on a framed photo of him and Lenora from a charity gala 2 years ago. They were smiling, his arm around her waist, looking every bit the perfect couple. He wondered if she had already been thinking about Weston even then, if their marriage had been a facade long before he realized it. He placed the photo face down on the desk and turned to leave. Just as they were loading the last of his belongings into the car, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. Lenora emerged, her face tight with anger when she saw Reuben and a stranger removing boxes from her home. "What are you doing?" she demanded, stalking toward them. "Getting my things," Reuben replied calmly. "And who is this?" She gestured to Jacob, suspicion in her eyes. "Jacob Reed, Ms. Calloway." Jacob introduced himself with professional courtesy. "I work for Margot Calloway. You brought a witness." Lenora looked at Reuben incredulously. "What, you think I'm going to attack you or something?" "I think you're going to do whatever serves your interests," Reuben replied. "And right now, I'm protecting mine." Lenora's eyes narrowed. "So, this is how it's going to be? Lawyers and witnesses and formal protocols. You set the terms when you invited your lover to our anniversary dinner," Reuben said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm just following your lead." "That wasn't my idea," Lenora insisted, a hint of desperation creeping into her voice. "Weston just showed up. I would never have planned it that way." "But you didn't stop it either," Reuben pointed out. "And from where I was sitting, you didn't look surprised to see him." Lenora's expression hardened. "Fine. You want to play it this way? We'll play it this way. But don't expect me to just roll over, Reuben. I have rights." "So did I," Reuben replied. "The right to a faithful wife, for one." "Guess we're both disappointed." He closed the trunk with a definitive thud. "I'll be in touch through Margot. Please direct any communication to her office from now on." "Margot?" Lenora's face paled slightly. "You're using your sister against me?" "Not against you," Reuben corrected. "For me. There's a difference." He got into the driver's seat while Jacob took the passenger side. As they backed out of the driveway, Reuben caught a glimpse of Lenora in the rearview mirror, standing alone in front of the house they had once shared, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. IT was the first step in a long game, but already he could see cracks in her composure. Good. Let her worry. Let her wonder what was coming next. Because Reuben Calloway was just getting started. 3 days later, Lenora Calloway sat at her desk at Beaumont Law, reviewing documents for a high-profile case. As one of the firm's senior paralegals, she was accustomed to pressure and tight deadlines. But today, her normally razor-sharp focus was scattered, her mind repeatedly drifting to Reuben and the disastrous dinner at Toulouse's. He hadn't responded to any of her calls or messages. The house felt eerily empty without him, a constant reminder of his absence. Even Weston's increased attention hadn't filled the void. Instead, it had created a new kind of pressure, expectations she wasn't sure she was ready to meet. That a knock at her office door pulled her from her thoughts. The receptionist stood there with a courier, who held a thick envelope. "Delivery for Lenora Calloway," the courier announced. "Needs to be signed for." With a puzzled frown, Lenora signed the electronic pad and accepted the envelope. The return address made her blood run cold. Calloway and Associates, attorneys at Law.Margot's firm. The receptionist and courier left, closing the door behind them. For a long moment, Lenora just stared at the envelope, dread building in her stomach. Finally, with trembling fingers, she tore it open. Divorce papers spilled on her desk. Her eyes scanned the document, catching phrases like irreconcilable differences and breach of marital contract due to infidelity. But it was the attached prenuptial agreement that truly captured her attention specifically, the highlighted clause stating that in case of infidelity, the offending party would forfeit all claims to marital assets. Panic rose in her throat. She had signed that agreement 10 years ago, confident it would never come into play. Now, it was a weapon pointed directly at her future. "This can't be happening," she whispered to herself. That a note was paper-clipped to the front page, Margot's elegant handwriting immediately recognizable. "Consider yourself served. I suggest you find representation immediately." Lenora reached for her phone, dialing Reuben's number automatically. Straight to voicemail, just like the past 3 days. Next, she tried Weston, who answered on the second ring. "Hey, beautiful." His smooth voice came through the speaker. "Miss me already?" Reuben filed for divorce, Lenora said, her voice tight with panic. He's enforcing the prenup. A pause. Calm down. What prenup? The one I signed before we got married, Lenora explained, frustration mounting. It says if either of us cheats, we forfeit everything. Everything, Weston. The house, the cars, the investments, even my share of the retirement accounts. He can't do that, Weston said dismissively. He can, and he is, Lenora countered. His sister is one of the best divorce attorneys in Louisiana. She's already filed the paperwork. I've just been served at work in front of everybody. Another pause. That's aggressive. That's Margot, Lenora replied bitterly. She's always hated me. Look, don't panic, Weston advised. Get a lawyer. Fight it. Prenups get overturned all the time. Not ones drafted by Margot Calloway, Lenora said. She's thorough. And after your little stunt at the restaurant, we have witnesses to the affair. Dozens of them. My stunt. Weston's voice hardened. You didn't seem to mind the time, because I was in shock. Lenora hissed, aware of how thin the office walls were. You blindsided me, just like you blindsided Reuben. What were you thinking? I was thinking I'm tired of being your dirty little secret, Weston replied. Tired of scheduling my life around your husband's activities. Well, congratulations, Lenora said bitterly. Now you've got me full-time. Hope it was worth it, because I'm about to lose everything. You're overreacting, Weston said, his tone dismissive again. Come over tonight. We'll talk about it. I can't just. Lenora began, but Weston had already hung up. She stared at her phone in disbelief. Not even the courtesy of a proper goodbye. For the first time, a sliver of doubt crept into her mind. Had she made a catastrophic mistake? A knock on her doorframe made her jump. Her boss, Martin Beaumont, stood there, concern etched on his face. Everything okay, Lenora? He asked. Amelia mentioned you received some legal documents that seemed to upset you. Lenora quickly gathered the divorce papers, stuffing them back into the envelope. It's fine, she lied. Just a personal matter. Martin raised an eyebrow. Anything I can help with? As your employer, but also as a friend. For a moment, Lenora considered confiding in him. Martin had been a mentor to her for years, but professional pride won out. Thank you, but I can handle it, she said with forced confidence. All right, Martin conceded, but my door is always open. After he left, Lenora sank back in her chair, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. Reuben wouldn't do this, she had thought. He wouldn't just leave her with nothing, but he had. And now she was facing a future very different from the one she had imagined. Across town, in his temporary office at Margot's firm, Reuben received a text from his sister. Lenora served. Immediate panic reaction. Called someone right after presumably Weston. A cold satisfaction settled in his chest. Good, he replied. Keep me posted. The wheels were in motion now. Lenora was feeling the first real consequences of her actions, and this was just the beginning. His phone buzzed again, this time with a call from the private investigator Margot had hired. Mr. Calloway, the man said when Reuben answered. I have some preliminary information you might find interesting. I'm listening, Reuben replied. Your wife and Miss America have been meeting 3 times a week, consistently, for at least the past 4 months. Always at his apartment in the CBD, never in public restaurants or hotels. Smart, Reuben commented. Less of a paper trail. Yes, but less romantic too, the investigator noted. No weekend getaways, no fancy dinners, just convenient meetings. Something about that struck Reuben as odd. Lenora loved grand gestures and luxurious experiences. A purely practical affair didn't sound like her style at all. Anything else? He asked. Mr. Merrick appears to have a pattern. The investigator continued. Based on my background research, both of his ex-wives were married when he began pursuing them. And both divorces followed a similar trajectory to what you're experiencing. Reuben's grip on the phone tightened. You're saying he's done this before. At least twice that I can document, the investigator confirmed. I'm still digging, but I thought you should know right away. Thank you, Reuben said, his mind racing. Keep digging. I want everything you can find on him. After hanging up, Reuben leaned back in his chair, processing this new information. Weston wasn't just an opportunistic homewrecker, he was a serial one, with a specific method of operation. And Lenora, for all her intelligence, had fallen right into his pattern. It was almost enough to make Reuben feel sorry for her. Almost, but not quite. He sent another text to Margot. Need to talk. New information about Weston. Her reply came instantly. Dinner tonight. 8 p.m. I'll bring food. The rest of the day passed in a haze of work and planning. Reuben had taken a leave of absence from his engineering firm, citing personal reasons. His boss, understanding the situation, had been supportive. Now, temporarily installed in one of Margot's empty offices, Reuben focused on rebuilding his life piece by piece. Bank accounts, insurance policies, credit cards. One by one, he separated his financial life from Lenora's, creating a clean break that would be difficult to contest. At T8, Margot arrived with Thai food and a bottle of wine. They ate in her office, the New Orleans skyline twinkling beyond the windows. Lenora called me, Margot said between bites of pad Thai, threatened, cajoled, and finally begged. In that order. What did she want? Reuben asked, though he could guess. For me to drop the case, initially. When I explained that wasn't happening, she tried to negotiate. Offered to sign a quickie divorce if you'd split the assets 50-50. Reuben snorted. Generous of her. When that didn't work, she switched to emotional appeals. Said you were being cruel, that I was turning you against her. Margot rolled her eyes, as if you needed any help seeing through her after that restaurant scene. What did you tell her? To hire a lawyer and direct all future communication through proper channels. Margot took a sip of wine. She scared Reuben. And she should be. Reuben nodded slowly. The investigator called. Apparently, Weston makes a habit of this, pursuing married women, breaking up marriages. He's done at least twice before. Margot's eyebrows shot up. Now, that is interesting. And potentially useful. How so? If we can prove a pattern, it strengthens our case for premeditation, Margot explained. Makes it clear this wasn't just a spontaneous romance, but a calculated destruction of your marriage. Does that matter legally? In terms of the divorce settlement? Not really, given the prenup, Margot admitted. But in terms of public opinion and potential civil suits for alienation of affection? Absolutely. Louisiana doesn't recognize alienation of affection suits anymore, Reuben pointed out. No, but Mississippi does, Margot replied with a sly smile. And if any of their little trysts took place across state lines, you're devious, Reuben said, almost admiringly. I prefer thorough, Margot corrected. Now, tell me more about what the investigator found. They spent the next hour discussing strategies, refining their approach based on the new information. By the time they finished the wine, a more comprehensive plan had taken shape, one that would target not just Lenora's financial security, but also Weston's carefully constructed public image. The key, Margot said as she gathered the empty food containers, is to make them turn on each other. Right now, they're united against you. We need to change that dynamic. How? By introducing doubt, Margot explained. Make Lenora question Weston's motives. Make Weston doubt Lenora's loyalty. It's not hard. Affairs are built on shaky foundations to begin with. Reuben considered this. I might have an idea about where to start. The next morning, Reuben made his first direct move against Weston. It started with a simple phone call to a florist he had used for years, a small shop in the French Quarter known for its discretion and excellent arrangements. I'd like to send flowers, Reuben told the owner, Marie. But anonymously, a secret admirer. Marie asked, amusement in her voice. Something like that, Reuben replied. They need to be delivered to this address. He gave her Weston's home in the Garden District, not his downtown apartment where he met Lenora, but his actual residence. And what would you like the card to say? Marie inquired. Reuben smiled to himself. Just missing our time together. It will be our secret. No signature. Mysterious, Marie commented. What kind of flowers? Red roses, Reuben decided. 2 dozen. It wasn't subtle, but it didn't need to be. The seeds of doubt were best planted with a heavy hand. After hanging up, Reuben felt a moment of hesitation. Was he really going through with this systematic destruction of his wife's affair? But then he remembered her face at the restaurant, the casual way she had pulled out a chair for her lover, and his resolve hardened. They had made their choices. Now they would live with the consequences. Flowers arrived at Weston's house on a Saturday morning, precisely when Reuben had calculated Lenora would be there. Since being served with divorce papers, she had all but moved in with Weston, spending most nights at his apartment downtown. But weekends were reserved for his more impressive Garden District home, where he hosted brunches and dinner parties for his carefully cultivated social circle, that, until recently, had included Reuben and Lenora as a couple. Reuben hadn't been present for the delivery, of course, but he didn't need to be. He could imagine the scene perfectly. Weston opening the door, the delivery person handing over 24 red roses with a card attached. Lenora, perhaps coming down the stairs or emerging from the kitchen, seeing the flowers and asking who they were from. The beauty of it was in its ambiguity. The message could be interpreted in so many ways, none of them comfortable for a couple already on uncertain ground. That evening, his phone rang Lenora's number. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice cold. "Did you send flowers to Weston's house?" Lenora demanded, skipping any pretense of pleasantries. "Why would I send flowers to the man who's sleeping with my wife?" Reuben countered. A pause. "Someone sent roses, with a message about keeping secrets." "Sounds like Weston has secrets of his own," Reuben observed. "I'm not surprised." "So it wasn't you?" Lenora persisted. "No, Lenora, it wasn't me," Reuben said truthfully. "Though I'm interested in why your first thought was that it might be." Another pause, longer this time. "Because it's exactly the kind of mind game Margot would suggest. My sister has better things to do than send flowers to your lover," Reuben replied. "Maybe you should be asking who else might have an interest in Weston's romantic life." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're not special, Lenora," Reuben said, the cruelty deliberate. "You're just the latest in a pattern. Did you know both of his ex-wives were married when he started pursuing them? Did you know he broke up those marriages exactly the way he broke up ours?" A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask him," Reuben suggested. "See how he reacts. Better yet, look it up yourself. It's all public record." "Why are you doing this?" Lenora asked, a hint of desperation in her voice. "I'm not doing anything," Reuben pointed out. "I'm just telling you facts you should have researched before you threw away our marriage. Now, is there anything else, or can I get back to my evening?" "Reuben, please," Lenora began, but he ended the call before she could continue. Setting down his phone, Reuben felt a mixture of satisfaction and a strange, hollow sensation. The conversation had gone exactly as planned. He had planted the seed of doubt without revealing his hand. But hearing Lenora's voice, even angry and accusatory, had stirred emotions he was trying hard to suppress. He shook it off. This was just the beginning. The flowers were a small opening salvo in what would be a much larger campaign. Over the next week, Reuben continued his strategy of subtle sabotage. Through carefully placed comments to mutual acquaintances, he ensured that rumors about Weston's infidelity began to circulate in their social circle. "Such a shame about Reuben and Lenora," he would say casually over lunch with a friend or colleague. "Though I hear Weston has quite the reputation. Someone should warn Lenora before she gets too invested." It was all very civilized, very restrained, just enough to get people talking, to create an atmosphere of uncertainty around the new couple. At the same time, Margot was moving forward with the legal proceedings, filing motions and requests for financial disclosures that would force both Lenora and Weston to reveal details about their relationship and their finances. The pressure was mounting from multiple directions. 10 days after the flower delivery, Reuben received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. W.M. Weston." This was unexpected. After careful consideration, Reuben replied, "Nothing to talk about." The response came quickly. 30 minutes. "The Sazerac bar at the Roosevelt. Or I'll come find you at your sister's place." A threat thinly veiled. Reuben considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out. What could Weston possibly want to say to him? "Fine," he texted back. 30 minutes. The Sazerac bar was busy for a Wednesday afternoon, tourists and business people mingling in the opulent setting. Reuben arrived exactly on time, spotting Weston at a corner table, a tumbler of whiskey already in front of him. Reuben ordered a club soda at the bar, then made his way to the table. He sat without greeting, his posture deliberately casual. Calloway, Weston acknowledged with a nod. Merrick, Reuben replied evenly. What's so urgent? Weston leaned forward, his expression intense. I want you to stop. Stop what exactly? The rumors. The investigation. The legal harassment. All of it. Weston's voice was low but forceful. You've made your point. Have I? Reuben asked, taking a sip of his club soda. And what point would that be? That you're angry. That you want revenge. Fine. But this is getting out of hand. Reuben studied the man across from him, successful, attractive, accustomed to getting his way. The type of man who had probably never faced real consequences for his actions. Let me be clear, Reuben said after a moment. I haven't even begun to make my point. What you're experiencing now is just the preamble. A flash of anger crossed Weston's face. Look, I get it. Your pride is hurt. But Lenora and I... Don't. Reuben cut him off. Don't pretend this is some great love story. We both know it's not. You don't know anything about my feelings for Lenora, Weston countered. I know your pattern, Reuben replied. Married woman, unhappy, or just bored. You swoop in, offer excitement, flattery, whatever they're missing. Once the marriage implodes, you play the hero for a while. Then you get bored and move on to the next conquest. How am I doing so far? Weston's jaw tightened. You've been busy with your research. Knowledge is power, Reuben said with a shrug. Something Lenora is beginning to understand as well. What's that supposed to mean? It means she's asking questions, Reuben replied, watching Weston carefully. About your past, your other relationships. About those flowers you received last weekend. A flicker of unease crossed Weston's face. The flowers were nothing. A mistake. Wrong address. Is that what you told her? Reuben asked, allowing a small smile. Interesting. Weston drained his whiskey and signaled for another. What do you want, Calloway? Money? Is that it? Name your price to end this vendetta. You think you could buy me off? Reuben let out a short laugh. This isn't about money, Weston. It's about justice. It's about making sure that actions have consequences. So it is revenge. Call it what you want, Reuben said dismissively. The outcome will be the same. The server arrived with Weston's second whiskey. He took a large swallow before speaking again. Lenora's suffering, he said, something like concern in his voice. This divorce, the prenup, the social isolation, it's taking a toll. And you care because... Because I care about her, Weston insisted. Despite what you think, this isn't just some game to me. Reuben leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. If you really cared about her, you wouldn't have blindsided her husband at their anniversary dinner. You wouldn't have put her in a position where she had to choose, publicly and humiliatingly. That wasn't love, Weston. That was ego. For a moment, something like guilt flashed in Weston's eyes. That was a mistake, he admitted. I was tired of being the secret, tired of playing second fiddle. Well, congratulations, Reuben said, rising from his chair. You're the main event now. Enjoy it while it lasts. This isn't over, Weston called after him. Reuben paused, looking back over his shoulder. No, he agreed. It's just beginning. As he walked out of the bar and into the humid New Orleans afternoon, Reuben felt a surge of confidence. Weston was rattled, concerned enough to request this meeting. The pressure was working. Now it was time to increase it. Later that night, Reuben sat in Margot's living room, recounting the meeting to his sister. He tried to buy me off, Reuben concluded. Offered money to end the vendetta, as he put it. Margot's eyes gleamed with interest. That's telling. He's worried enough to try bribery. And he's concerned about Lenora, Reuben added. Or at least, he's trying to appear concerned. The cracks are forming, Margot observed with satisfaction. It's only been 2 weeks, and already they're feeling the strain. What's our next move? Reuben asked. Margot considered for a moment. I think it's time to go public. So far, we've been working behind the scenes, but a more visible approach might accelerate things. What did you have in mind? The Barrett Foundation Gala is next weekend, Margot reminded him. Everyone who's anyone in New Orleans will be there, including Weston. He's on the board. And you'll be there too, Margot said with a smile. As my plus one, looking successful, untroubled, and very much moving on with your life. Ruben frowned. Is that really necessary? I'm not interested in playing social games. This isn't a game, Margot countered. It's strategy. Right now, the narrative is that Weston stole your wife and you retreated to lick your wounds. We need to change that perception. I don't care what people think, Ruben insisted. But Weston does, Margot pointed out. And so does Lenora. Your apparent indifference will sting more than any legal motion I could file. Ruben considered this. The idea of attending a gala, of making small talk with the same people who had been gossiping about his failed marriage, was deeply unappealing. But Margot had a point. Perception mattered, especially in the social circles Weston and Lenora inhabited. Fine, he conceded, but I'm not dancing. Margot laughed. Deal. The Barrett Foundation Gala was held at the Windsor Court Hotel, a prestigious venue known for its elegant ballrooms and impeccable service. Ruben arrived with Margot on his arm, both dressed impeccably, he in a tailored tuxedo, she in a sleek black gown that managed to be both professional and striking. As they entered the ballroom, Ruben felt eyes turn their way. News of his divorce had spread through their social circle, as had rumors about Weston's involvement. Their appearance together, Ruben, looking composed and confident. Margot, every inch the successful attorney, was bound to cause a stir. There's Weston, Margot murmured, nodding subtly toward the bar. Alone, Ruben followed her gaze. Weston stood with a group of men in similar tuxedos, laughing at something one of them had said. But his eyes kept scanning the room, a hint of tension in his posture. No, Lenora? Ruben asked. Interesting, isn't it? Margot mused. She should be here, hanging on his arm, showing the world how happy they are together. Her absence speaks volumes. They made their way around the room, stopping to chat with acquaintances and colleagues. Ruben played his part well, answering questions about his work and his recent projects, carefully avoiding any mention of his personal life. When the topic of his divorce inevitably arose, he responded with dignified brevity. We're moving in different directions. These things happen. No bitterness, no anger, just calm acceptance. It was a performance designed to make Weston look like the desperate one, the man who had resorted to stealing another man's wife. Halfway through the evening, as Ruben was engaged in conversation with the dean of the engineering school at Tulane, he felt a presence at his elbow. Turning, he found himself face to face with Weston. Calloway. Weston greeted him, the forced civility in his tone betrayed by the tightness around his eyes. Didn't expect to see you here. Merrick, Ruben returned coolly. My sister is a longtime supporter of the Barrett Foundation. And where's the formidable Ms. Calloway? Weston asked, glancing around. Networking, Ruben replied. It's what she does best. An awkward silence fell between them, noticed by the dean, who excused himself with a murmured apology. I'm surprised Lenora isn't with you, Ruben commented casually. I thought she enjoyed these events. A muscle twitched in Weston's jaw. She wasn't feeling well. That's a shame, Ruben said, his tone suggesting he didn't believe it for a moment. Please give her my best. He turned to leave, but Weston's next words stopped him. This isn't going to work, you know, Weston said quietly. Whatever you're trying to do. Ruben looked back at him. I'm not trying to do anything, Weston. I'm just living my life. The rumors, the legal pressure, showing up here looking like you don't have a care in the world, it's all very calculated. Is it? Ruben raised an eyebrow. Or maybe I'm just moving on. Maybe, unlike you, I don't need to destroy other people's relationships to feel good about myself. Weston's face darkened. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Ruben replied evenly. And apparently, so does Lenora. Otherwise, she'd be here, wouldn't she? Before Weston could respond, Margot appeared at Ruben's side. There you are, she said warmly, though her eyes were cool as they assessed Weston. I've been looking for you. The chairman wants to discuss that donation to the Engineering Scholarship Fund. It was a lie, smooth and practiced, designed to emphasize Ruben's philanthropic side while providing an exit from the confrontation. Of course, Ruben agreed, turned to Weston. If you'll excuse me. As they walked away, Margot murmured, that looked intense. He's rattled, Ruben confirmed. And Lenora's not here, which means either they're fighting or he's embarrassed to be seen with her publicly. Either way, It's progress, Margot noted with satisfaction. The rest of the evening passed without incident. Reuben played his role perfectly, presenting the image of a man who had been wronged, but was moving forward with dignity. By the time they left, the whispers had already started about how well Reuben looked, about Lenora's conspicuous absence, about whether Weston had bitten off more than he could chew. In the car on the way home, Margot looked over at her brother. "You did well tonight." "It felt strange," Reuben admitted. "Pretending everything is fine when inside, I'm still angry." "Sometimes the best revenge is looking like you don't need revenge," Margot observed. "Tonight, you showed everyone that you're not the broken-hearted victim they expected. You showed them that Lenora didn't destroy you. And that bothers Weston," Reuben realized. "He wanted me broken." "Exactly," Margot agreed. "Men like him feed on other people's pain. By denying him that satisfaction, you're already winning." Reuben nodded slowly, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about causing pain to Lenora and Weston, it was about refusing to be their victim, about reclaiming his dignity and his power. And on that front, at least, he was succeeding. 3 weeks after the Barrett Foundation Gala, Reuben's campaign against Lenora and Weston was in full swing. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, with Margot filing aggressive motions that forced Lenora to account for every dime she had spent over the past year. The investigator had compiled a detailed dossier on Weston's past relationships, revealing a clear pattern of pursuing married women, breaking up their marriages, and then moving on within a year or two. Most importantly, the seeds of doubt Reuben had planted were blooming beautifully. Through strategic comments and carefully placed rumors, he had created an atmosphere of suspicion around Weston. Did he really care for Lenora, or was she just another conquest? Was he already seeing someone else on the side? Lenora, for her part, was beginning to show the strain. Mutual friends reported that she looked tired, anxious. She had moved out of Weston's apartment back to the house she had shared with Reuben, though the divorce settlement would likely force her to sell it. The stage was set for the final act in Reuben's plan. The New Orleans Business Association was holding its annual awards dinner at the Ritz-Carlton. As one of the city's most prominent developers, Weston was not only attending, but receiving an award for Urban Renewal Project of the Year. It would be a night of triumph for him, a public validation of his professional success. Reuben intended to make sure it was memorable for entirely different reasons. "Are you sure about this?" Margot asked as she helped Reuben prepare in her apartment. "Once we do this, there's no going back." "I'm sure," Reuben confirmed, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "They embarrassed me publicly. It's only fair to return the favor." "Fair," Margot repeated with a slight smile. Funny how that word changes meaning depending on which side you're on. The plan was simple but effective. Through his connections in the engineering world, Reuben had arranged to attend the dinner as part of a contingent from his firm. Lenora wouldn't expect to see him there. Their social circles had been carefully separated since the divorce proceedings began to as for the rest. Well, the investigator had earned his substantial fee. The Ritz-Carlton Ballroom was a sea of New Orleans business elite when Reuben arrived. He kept a low profile, staying at his table near the back of the room. Occasionally scanning the crowd for familiar faces, he spotted Weston almost immediately hard to miss in a custom tuxedo, holding court near the stage where he would soon accept his award. Beside him stood Lenora, looking elegant but strained in a silver gown, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as oh she had come after all. Perfect as dinner was served, Reuben observed the couple from a distance. They looked the part of success, the handsome developer and his beautiful companion, but there was a tension between them visible even from across the room. They rarely looked at each other, their interactions seeming practiced rather than natural. The cracks were there. All it would take was the right pressure to break them wide open. Midway through the main course, Reuben excused himself from his table and made his way toward the restrooms. As he passed near Weston's table, he caught Lenora's eye. Her face paled, her fork freezing halfway to her mouth. Reuben nodded politely and continued walking, fighting back a smile at her shocked expression. She hadn't expected him here, in this space she had claimed as part of her new life with Weston. His presence alone was enough to throw her off balance. In the hallway outside the ballroom, Reuben checked his phone. A text from the investigator confirmed that everything was in place. Now it was just a matter of timing that he returned to his table for dessert and coffee, making small talk with his colleagues while keeping one eye on Weston's table. The awards ceremony began shortly after, with various business leaders receiving recognition for achievements in different categories. When it was time for the Urban Renewal Award, Weston made his way to the stage amid polite applause. He accepted the crystal trophy with practiced humility, launching into a speech about vision and community partnership. That was when a young woman entered the ballroom through a side door. She was in her 20s, attractive in a flashy way, wearing a dress that was just a shade too tight, too short for the formal occasion. She stood at the edge of the crowd, scanning the room with purpose. Her eyes locked on Weston, and she began making her way toward the stage. Reuben watched, keeping his expression neutral. The woman and actress hired by the investigator played her role perfectly. She moved with the determination of someone with a mission, drawing curious glances as she wove between tables. Lenora noticed her first, her body language shifting from bored to alert as she tracked the woman's progress. By the time the woman reached the front of the room, standing directly before the stage where Weston was concluding his speech, Lenora was half rising from her seat, suspicion evident in every line of her body. And in conclusion, Weston was saying, "I'd like to thank." "Weston," the woman called out, her voice cutting through the polite atmosphere like a knife. "I thought I'd surprise you." A ripple of murmurs swept through the ballroom. Weston froze, microphone in hand, staring at the woman with an expression of utter confusion. "I'm sorry," he said after an awkward pause. "Do I know you?" The woman's face fell in what appeared to be genuine hurt. "Wow," she said, loud enough for half the room to hear. 3 weeks together, and suddenly you don't know me? That's cold, even for you." More murmurs, louder now. Heads turned toward Lenora, who stood rigid beside her table, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. "I think there's been a mistake," Weston said, his smooth confidence faltering. "If you'll just—" "A mistake?" the woman repeated incredulously. "Was it a mistake when you told me your relationship was basically over? When you said you were just staying with her for appearance's sake until after the award season?" Gasps from the audience now, the polite veneer of the evening cracking under the weight of unexpected drama. Weston finally seemed to grasp the severity of the situation. He handed the microphone back to the MC and stepped down from the stage, approaching the woman with a tight smile. "Let's discuss this privately," he said, reaching for her arm. She stepped back. "I don't think so. I'm tired of being your dirty little secret, Weston. Tired of scheduling my life around your convenient little windows of availability." The echo of Weston's own words to Lenora at the restaurant was not lost on Reuben. It was a deliberate choice, a twist of a knife designed to maximize the impact. Lenora moved then, her face contorted with rage. She strode toward Weston and the woman, her silver dress catching the light as she moved. "Is this true?" she demanded, her voice carrying in the suddenly silent ballroom. "Have you been seeing her?" "Lenora, please," Weston said, glancing around at the rapt audience. "This isn't the place." "Answer me," Lenora insisted, her control slipping further. "Have you been cheating on me?" "Cheating?" the woman repeated with a bitter laugh. "That's rich, coming from you. At least he was only dating you when we got together. You were married." It was the final straw. Lenora's hand shot out, connecting with Weston's face in a slap that echoed through the ballroom. The crack of palm against cheek was followed by a collective gasp from the audience. "You bastard," Lenora hissed, tears of fury streaming down her face. "You complete and utter bastard." Cameras flashed as people captured the moment on their phones. In an age of social media, Reuben knew this scene would be circulating within minutes, shared and reshared among New Orleans social elite. Weston stood frozen, one hand pressed to his reddening cheek, his carefully cultivated image of success and respectability crumbling before his eyes. "Lenora," he began, reaching for her. She backed away. "Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again." With that, she turned and fled the ballroom, dignity in tatters. Weston hesitated, looking between the retreating figure of Lenora and the young woman still standing before him. "Who are you?" he finally asked, his voice low and dangerous. Who put you up to this? The woman merely smiled. Ask yourself who you've hurt, she replied, her script well rehearsed. The list is probably too long to narrow down. She turned and walked out the same door she had entered through, leaving Weston standing alone in a room full of staring eyes and whispered comments. From his table at the back, Reuben watched it all unfold with a cold satisfaction. The scene had played out even better than he had anticipated. Lenora's public meltdown, Weston's humiliation, it was perfect. His phone buzzed with a text from Margot. Done. Done, he replied. Complete success. He slipped out during the confusion that followed, leaving behind a room buzzing with the scandal that would dominate conversation for weeks to come. Outside the hotel, he paid the actress her final installment, thanking her for a convincing performance. Was any of it true? She asked curiously. The cheating accusation, does it matter? Reuben countered. She considered this, then shrugged. I guess not. The damage is done either way. Indeed it was. By morning, videos of the confrontation would be circulating on social media. The respectable businessman and his married girlfriend, exposed as hypocrites and cheats. Their reputations would never quite recover. As Reuben drove home through the quiet streets of New Orleans, he felt a sense of completion. The public humiliation had been the final piece of his plan, the capstone to weeks of methodical pressure and manipulation. Lenora and Weston had embarrassed him publicly, had laughed at his pain, and treated his marriage as disposable. Now they knew how it felt to be exposed, to have their personal lives become fodder for gossip and judgment. An eye for an eye. A humiliation for a humiliation. Justice, of a sort. 3 days after the disaster at the Ritz-Carlton, rain pounded the streets of New Orleans, turning the city into a maze of puddles and limited visibility. Reuben sat in Margot's living room, watching the downpour through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a book open but unread in his lap. The fallout from the Business Awards dinner had been swift and devastating. Videos of Lenora slapping Weston had gone viral within the local business community, spawning countless memes and private text chains. The woman whom most assumed was actually Weston's mistress, not a hired actress, had disappeared, adding to the mystery and speculation. Weston had issued a terse statement denying any inappropriate relationship and claiming a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. His moment of triumph had been transformed into a public relations nightmare. As for Lenora, she had gone silent. No social media posts, no public appearances. According to Margot's sources, she hadn't been to work in 3 days, calling in sick with an unspecified illness. Revenge, Reuben was discovering, tasted different than he had expected. Not sweet exactly, more like satisfying. A debt repaid in full. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Outside your sister's building. Need to talk. Lenora. It had to be. Reuben moved to the window, looking down at the rain-soaked street. Sure enough, a familiar figure stood on the sidewalk, huddled under an umbrella that was doing little to protect her from the sideways rain. He considered ignoring her, letting her stand there in the downpour until she gave up and left. It would be a fitting continuation of his revenge. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or some remnant of the man he had been before all this began, made him respond. Not coming down. Say what you need to say via text. Her reply came quickly. Please, Reuben. Just 5 minutes. I'm so. He hesitated, then typed. 5 minutes. That's it. Grabbing an umbrella, he took the elevator down to the lobby. Lenora was waiting just outside the doors, her expensive outfit drenched, her makeup running slightly despite the umbrella's protection. You could have waited in your car, Reuben pointed out as he stepped outside, keeping his own umbrella between them like a shield. I didn't drive, Lenora admitted. I took a cab, told him to wait, but he left. Reuben glanced up and down the street. No sign of a waiting taxi. 5 minutes, he reminded her. Clock's ticking. Lenora pushed her wet hair away from her face. In the harsh light from the building's exterior, she looked older, more vulnerable. I made a mistake, she said simply. Reuben felt a laugh building in his chest, bitter and cold. A mistake, he repeated. Is that what we're calling it now? I shouldn't have let things go so far with Weston, Lenora continued, her voice barely audible above the rain. I shouldn't have hurt you that way. But you did, Reuben pointed out, deliberately and publicly. I know, Lenora acknowledged, a hint of desperation in her tone. And I'm sorry, truly sorry. I got caught up in something that felt exciting, different. I convinced myself that what we had was over anyway, that I deserve happiness. At my expense, Reuben added. Lenora looked down. Yes, at your expense. They stood in silence for a moment, rain drumming on their umbrellas, creating a private space in the middle of the urban downpour. Was it worth it? Reuben finally asked, trading 10 years of marriage for whatever that was with Weston. Lenora's eyes, when they met his, were filled with tears that mingled with the rain on her cheeks. No, she admitted. It wasn't worth it. He wasn't worth it. And now it's over, she said flatly. After that scene at the awards dinner, I can't be with someone who would do that to me. So he did cheat? Reuben asked, genuinely curious. Lenora shrugged, a gesture of exhaustion rather than indifference. I don't know. He swears he didn't, that the woman was lying, that it was all some setup. But the things she knew, the way she talked, it felt real. Like when Weston showed up at our anniversary dinner. Reuben suggested. That felt real too, didn't it? Lenora flinched. I deserve that, she acknowledged. But Reuben, you don't have to be so cruel. This isn't you. Maybe it is now, Reuben countered. Maybe this is who I became when I discovered my wife of 10 years had been lying to my face for months. I want to fix this, Lenora said, reaching for his arm. Reuben stepped back, maintaining the distance between them. Fix what? Our marriage? That's not possible, Lenora. Not after everything that's happened. Then can we at least stop hurting each other? She pleaded. Call off the legal attacks, the social warfare. Let's just divorce like civilized people and move on. You mean let you walk away with half of everything, despite the prenup? Reuben clarified. Let you and Weston play the victims of malicious rumors. Weston is out of the picture, Lenora insisted. I told you it's over. Until the next exciting man comes along. Reuben said dismissively. Lenora's expression hardened slightly. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Reuben pointed out. You made choices, Lenora. Now you're facing the consequences. That's how life works. So this is it? She asked, her voice breaking. You're really going to take everything from me? The house, the savings, my social standing? 10 years together. And you can just erase me? I didn't erase you, Reuben corrected her. You erased yourself when you decided our marriage was disposable. The rain began to intensify, sheets of water falling between them. Lenora's umbrella, cheap and flimsy, was starting to collapse under the assault. You don't have to be so cruel, she repeated, a sob catching in her throat. Reuben really looked at her for the first time since that night at the restaurant. The woman he had loved, had built a life with, reduced to this, standing in the rain, makeup streaked, begging for mercy. A part of him wanted to relent, to offer some comfort or concession. But another part, the part that had been forged in the fire of betrayal, remained unmoved. No, I don't have to be cruel, he agreed quietly. But you haven't seen cruel. With that, he turned and walked back into the building, leaving her standing alone in the downpour. Through the lobby windows, he watched as she stood there for a moment longer, shoulders slumped in defeat, before finally turning and walking away, disappearing into the curtain of rain. Upstairs, Margot was waiting, concern evident on her face. Was that Lenora? Reuben nodded, shaking the rain from his umbrella. She wanted to fix things. Fix as in stop the legal proceedings, ease up on the social pressure. She claims she and Weston are over. Margot raised an eyebrow. Do you believe her? Reuben considered the question. Yes, he admitted, but it doesn't change anything, doesn't it? Margot asked carefully. If she's suffered enough, lost enough, it's not about making her suffer, Reuben clarified. It's about justice. Actions have consequences. She made her choices. Margot studied her brother's face. Are you sure this is still about justice? It's not just about hurting her the way she hurt you. Reuben turned to look out at the rain again, watching Lenora's retreating figure until it vanished from sight. Maybe it's both, he admitted. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you human, Margot replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. But at some point, You'll need to decide whether continuing this campaign serves justice or just prolongs your own pain. Reuben nodded slowly, acknowledging the wisdom in his sister's words. But as he thought about Lenora standing in the rain, pleading for mercy, he felt no inclination toward forgiveness. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too complete. Some things couldn't be fixed. Some bridges, once burned, remained forever ashes. And Reuben Calloway never forgave. 2 months later, Reuben stood in his new apartment in the warehouse district, unpacking the last of his books. The place was smaller than the house he had shared with Lenora, but it was his alone a fresh start, untainted by memories of betrayal. The divorce had been finalized the previous week, with the court upholding the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. Lenora had walked away with only her personal belongings and a small settlement that Reuben had agreed to out of a last-minute sense of, not mercy, exactly, but pragmatism. It was worth the money to have the matter concluded quickly and cleanly. The house had been sold, the proceeds going primarily to Reuben. Their joint investments had been liquidated and divided according to the prenup's terms. Their shared social life had been dismantled, friends and acquaintances forced to choose sides in the aftermath of the scandal. Most had chosen Reuben. Lenora's affair and subsequent public meltdown had made her a liability in the image-conscious circles they had inhabited. Weston, meanwhile, had retreated from public view, focusing on his business interests and avoiding social events where he might face uncomfortable questions. The revenge plan had succeeded beyond Reuben's expectations. Lenora and Weston were humiliated, separated, their reputations in tatters. The cold satisfaction he had anticipated was there, a steady presence in the background of his days. But there was something else too, something he hadn't expected, a sense of emptiness, of hollowness beneath the victory. What now? The drive for revenge had consumed him for months, given him purpose and direction when his life had been upended. With that goal achieved, what would fill the void? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Margot, it's done," she said when he answered. "The last of the paperwork went through this morning. You are officially a free man." "Good," Reuben replied, setting down the book he had been holding. "Thank you for everything, Margot. I couldn't have done this without you. What are sisters for, if not helping orchestrate elaborate revenge schemes?" she replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Listen, I'm meeting some colleagues for drinks at that new place on Magazine Street. Join us." Reuben hesitated. His instinct was to decline, to stay in his half-unpacked apartment with his thoughts and his books. But wasn't isolation exactly what Lenora and Weston would expect of him? The wounded ex-husband, too broken to rejoin society. "Sure," he decided. "Text me the address. I'll be there in an hour." After hanging up, Reuben showered and changed, choosing clothes that projected confidence and success, a subtle but important statement that he was moving forward, not dwelling in the past. The bar on Magazine Street was upscale but unpretentious, with Edison bulbs casting a warm glow over reclaimed wood tables. Margot waved from a corner where she sat with 3 colleagues Reuben recognized from her firm. "The man of the hour," she said as he approached, raising her glass. "Officially divorced and significantly wealthier." The others laughed, clinking glasses in a toast. Reuben accepted a whiskey and settled into the conversation, grateful for Margot's ability to make any situation feel normal, manageable. Halfway through his drink, he excused himself to use the restroom. As he was returning to the table, a familiar voice caught his attention. "Reuben." He turned to find Weston Merrick standing nearby, drink in hand, expression guarded. "Weston," Reuben acknowledged with a nod. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Meeting a client," Weston explained, gesturing vaguely toward another table. "Heard your divorce was finalized. Congratulations." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with irony and unspoken accusations. "Thank you," Reuben replied evenly. "I understand congratulations are in order for you as well. New development project in the CBD." Weston nodded, a flicker of surprise crossing his face at Reuben's civil tone. "Breaking ground next month." "Good for you." A pause, heavy with the weight of everything that had happened between them. Finally, Weston spoke again, his voice lower, more personal. For what it's worth, I didn't expect it to end the way it did. The public scene, the accusations, that wasn't the plan. Plans have a way of going awry, Reuben observed, especially when they're built on someone else's pain. Weston had the grace to look uncomfortable. I suppose I deserve that. You deserved worse, Reuben replied calmly. We both know it. Another pause. Weston took a sip of his drink, then asked, Have you spoken to Lenora? Not since the rain, Reuben said, the memory of her standing on the sidewalk, makeup streaked, pleading for mercy, still vivid in his mind. Have you? No, Weston admitted. Not directly. I heard she's leaving New Orleans, moving to Atlanta to start over. The news caught Reuben by surprise. Lenora had always loved New Orleans, had built her entire life around the city's social and professional circles. For her to leave, the damage to her reputation must have been even more severe than he had realized. Good for her, he said after a moment. Fresh starts can be valuable. Weston studied him, as if trying to gauge whether there was any genuine sentiment behind the words. You really don't care, do you? After 10 years together. I cared, Reuben corrected him. That's why this happened. Because I cared, and you both treated that like it was nothing. Weston looked away, unable to meet Reuben's steady gaze. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I am sorry, not just for how things ended, but for how they began. The restaurant. That was cruel and unnecessary. Yes, Reuben agreed. It was. He felt no urge to accept the apology, to offer absolution. Some actions couldn't be undone with words. Some wounds wouldn't heal with a simple, I'm sorry. Well, Weston said after a moment, clearly recognizing that no forgiveness would be forthcoming. I should get back to my client. Of course, Reuben replied with a nod. Good luck with the new project. As Weston walked away, shoulders slightly slumped beneath his expensive suit, Reuben felt a curious sense of completion. The man who had swooped into his life with such arrogance, such entitled confidence, now reduced to awkward apologies and bar encounters. Justice, of a sort, he returned to Margot's table, sliding back into his seat with a slight smile. Was that Weston Merrick? One of Margot's colleagues asked, eyes wide with interest. It was, Reuben confirmed. And? Margot prompted, curiosity evident in her expression. And nothing, Reuben replied. Just a civil exchange between two professionals who happened to know each other. Margot's eyebrow raised skeptically. And how did that feel? Reuben considered the question, swirling the whiskey in his glass. Satisfying, he decided. Like the end of a long, difficult project. To completed projects, Margot said, raising her glass in another toast. And new beginnings, Reuben added, clinking his glass against hers. Later, as they were preparing to leave, Margot pulled Reuben aside. Are you really okay? She asked, her usual sharp demeanor softening into genuine concern. With everything that's happened, everything we didn't do anything they didn't deserve, Reuben pointed out. True, Margot acknowledged. But revenge can be consuming. I don't want you to get lost in it, to let it define you moving forward. Reuben looked at his sister, the one person who had stood by him without question, who had fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself. I won't, he promised. This chapter is closed. But I'll never forgive them, Margot. That's not who I am. I know, she said with a slight smile. The Calloway curse long memories and longer grudges. Some people call it integrity, Reuben countered. Standing by your principles, even when it would be easier to let things go. Some people call it stubbornness, Margot replied with a laugh. But either way, I'm proud of how you handled yourself through all this. You didn't break, didn't lose yourself to anger or despair. That's victory, Reuben, not just what happened to them, but who you remained despite it all. Her words stayed with him as he walked home through the warm New Orleans evening, the city alive with music and laughter around him. Victory. It wasn't just about what he had done to Lenora and Weston. It was about what he hadn't allowed them to do to him, break his spirit, destroy his dignity, reduce him to a bitter shell of himself. Yes, he had sought revenge, had orchestrated their downfall with cold precision. But he had done so without losing himself in the process, without becoming someone he couldn't recognize. That in his new apartment, Reuben poured himself one last whiskey and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. The emptiness he had felt earlier had receded, replaced by a quiet determination. Life would go on. He would build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed, and he would never allow anyone to betray him again. Some doors, once closed, remained locked forever. Some wounds, even when healed, left scars that would always be visible. Some lessons, once learned, were never forgotten. Reuben Calloway raised his glass to the night, to the future, to himself. Victory wasn't always pretty, but it was his, and that was enough.